Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Jarrell Miller vs Lucas Browne is set to take place later in 2022, according to Miller's co-promoter Greg Cohen, who has confirmed to Dan Raphael that the fight is agreed and could take place November 13th in Abu Dhabi or November 26th at the O2 Arena on Daniel Dubois' next card. So this is a bit of a bolt from the blue. I don't really think that many heavyweight fans expected a Miller and Browne matchup was going to be made, but it looks like it is going to go ahead. And actually, Lucas Browne, see here on screen, these are different posts that he has put up on his Instagram. So clearly there is a little more than just something in this, that Browne is confirming that, yes, he is going to be facing Jarrell Miller should things work out and dates be agreed, all that sort of stuff. But obviously from what we're hearing from Greg Cohen via Dan Raphael is that they've got far enough down the path where all these things like financials must have been agreed. And Jarrell Miller actually is going to be fighting Ebenezer Tete ahead of a Lucas Browne fight, and that is reportedly for Kazakhstan on October the 3rd. As we know, Jarrell Miller, multiple failed drug tests in recent years, the most recent of which was in 2020 when he was going to be facing Jerry Forrest, and he popped again. Famously had popped on a number of tests in 2019 ahead of what would have been a fight with Anthony Joshua. Hence the nickname Jarrell Big Pharmacy Miller, which of course I'm quite fond of using at times. But Miller and Browne, it's kind of interesting because with Jarrell Miller working his way back, he's had a couple of warm-up fights so far, and this is certainly a more high-profile name that he's facing. But a guy like Ariel Esteban Bracamonte, who Miller went 10 rounds with, and it wasn't fought at a hellacious pace, but Bracamonte was durable. Browne is a guy who is in his 40s now, 43. He is well past his prime, but he is still dangerous, and we saw that against Junior Farr in his last fight. Browne was not expected to win that fight, and he blitzed Junior Farr, stopped him in the first round. So there is a level of danger here, because you kind of look at Jarrell Miller and go, well, what's left? If he is clean, if he is off the juice, what is Jarrell Miller going to be? And we don't quite know that. There were some shades of the old Miller in his most recent comeback fight a few weeks back, where he sort of stepped up his activity in, what was it, the second round, third round, whatever it was, and he kind of looked like the Miller of old throwing volume. But at the same time, we don't really know what we have. And if Lucas Browne can find Miller and hurt Miller, and that's a possibility because Jarrell Miller's not that hard to find. His defense is his offense. So for a few reasons, this is kind of interesting, but I do think that if it goes past a certain number of rounds, that Lucas Browne probably fades. So I think conventional wisdom would sort of dictate that for this fight, Lucas Browne is probably going to be at his most dangerous early, but he could fade and gas out, and that's when Miller will probably take over. But at the same time, you also have to just take a look at one of Browne's most recent fights, just for a pause and go, okay, even though he could gas, he could still do something later on, because he was getting pieced up against Whainga Opilu. And then as soon as Opilu slowed down, Browne was able to land some big bombs and got him out of there. But then again, Whainga Opilu and Jarrell Miller, they are on different levels. Even if Miller is a bit diminished from his previous sort of showings, a few years back, I think he's still on a different level. But it's a kind of random fight, but also it's interesting at the same time. Lucas Browne legitimately has good power, and he must be getting well paid to jump on this card. Potentially the glide path for the winner is a potential fight with Daniel Dubois. And actually, just going back to the start of the story where it talked about two different cards, Abu Dhabi, November 13th, or potentially November 26th at the O2. It is interesting that those two dates are in play being mentioned. There was talk that Dillian Whyte was going to be facing Daniel Dubois and an announcement was imminent. But then Anthony Joshua lost and Dillian Whyte was very publicly saying, hey Joshua, let's have a rematch. And perhaps he was in play for a fight with Daniel Dubois for the Middle East. and maybe he still is, but it would have probably taken a little bit of Middle Eastern money potentially to get that fight made, because I'm sure Dillian Whyte had certain demands. If he's going to be facing a guy who's a rising sort of fringe contender, he's going to get well paid, because it probably wouldn't do too many pay-per-view buys comparatively on pay-per-view. So if he's getting the bag, maybe he was willing to take that fight. Perhaps the November 26th is Daniel Dubois versus someone else. That's like the backup option. We have to sort of consider these things. But regardless, potentially Daniel Dubois versus the winner of that fight. Lucas Browne was a name that was briefly thrown around a few months ago after his win over Junior Fa to face a guy like Daniel Dubois. He was saying, actually, I would like that fight. This is Browne. So Miller, Browne, whenever it happens, it's interesting for all sorts of reasons, because we've got questions, one, about Miller, but two, Lucas Browne, how much has he really got left? Because it has been diminishing returns in recent years. He's looked pretty gassed and washed in some of his fights, but he has found ways to win, like in the Opidu one, and obviously he sort of turned things on its head in the Fa fight. So I'm not going to completely write him off, because he's got that power, and it can change a fight. And if he does catch Miller early, who is easy to find, we could have an upset on our hands. I'm not willing to write him off again and just say that he's washed and got no shot, because we've seen him change fights. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.